You're listening to the Best Morning Routine Ever podcast, the show that proves no one stumbles upon success ever. With your host, Lou Need. Every Mondays and Thursdays, we deliver cold hard evidence behind the power of a robust morning routine. Get ready to be transformed by the renewal of your mind.
Hello, morning enthusiasts. Welcome to the Best Morning Routine Ever podcast. I am your host, Dr. Lunid, and today I have the honor of introducing a very phenomenal guest to the show, another doctor, and we are going to talk about all things mental health. We are going to talk about psychology, routine, and the power of morning routines and habits and how that affect us mentally. But also how Dr. Deepak, has been super successful. He is the founder and CEO of SessionTogether. He is chair of health equity at the American Psychiatric Association, and he is a pediatrician, adult and child psychiatrist by way of the Mount Sinai Hospital. So he is dyslexic, so we're going to hear a lot more about that. He is the first generation American, and he's on a mission to help others achieve their goals, but also understand the psyche. So with no further ado, he is an expert. Dr. Deepak has founded Imagine Health, now a culture house company. And so with no further ado, Dr. Deepak, welcome to the show.
Okay. Hi. Thanks so much for having me. Wow. Thanks for the introduction.
It's my pleasure. I'm really looking forward to hearing your story and how you've been in this field for decades. And so how you've seen it evolve also over the years. But before we get into that, I know you are of Indian descent. So tell us a little bit about your background and your journey here thus far.
Yeah, sure. Well, I was born in Queens. And so my family's from India, and it's a big part of who I am. But I was born in Queens and then grew up in New Jersey. And yeah, I'm an American, proud first generation Indian American. And yeah, it's an important part, I think, for anyone who lives a dual existence culturally knows how important our roots are. They certainly were for me.
I'm from Haiti, and my parents migrated to New York. Actually, my mom still lives in Brooklyn, and we came into the country, and the values are very important, but they came with the mindset to give us kids a better future. And so we have to go off and be and look into education, become doctors, engineers, or whatnot. So we know tell us a little bit about the difference in, having an immigrant background and the values that carries on to us being driven throughout life.
Yeah. I always joke around and say that, my parents never told me to become a doctor. You have the option to become a doctor, an engineer, a lawyer. Those are the options. My parents never told me you had to become a doctor. That said, it's what they really respected so much that, and the way Indian parents sometimes get you to do things, or in my case, at least, is by just loving the hell out of you. And you feel guilty to do anything that's going to not be,
not disappoint them.
Yeah. You want to make them proud. I always say as a pediatric psychiatrist that, kids come out of the box wanting to please. We sometimes think, oh, we have to tell kids what to do. We got to tell them what is the right thing, the wrong thing. But they actually, and even though, kids get into trouble, I definitely got into trouble and did things, but at the core, we want to please our parents. And I was definitely wanting to do that. And they were pleased. They were able to say, hey, this is my son, he's a doctor. And still to this day, it makes me happy. But I always say I'm like the Mowgli from Jungle Book of mental health. I'm an entrepreneur by birth, but I was raised by doctors. And so I've been moving and shaking throughout my medical career.
Yeah. And it's so you picked mental health, and right now you're on a mission because you're super passionate about shifting the mainstream, right? The narrative around mental health. So to a lot of cultures, it's taboo. How are you shifting that language?
Yeah, well, in my career, so I'm a child and adolescent and adult psychiatrist, so you cover the whole spectrum. But a lot of people are surprised to find out that I also am a pediatrician. I trained in pediatrics, and I was a pediatrician to a lot of kids for 5 years in Harlem. And it's like, okay, why did you do that? And for me, I've always tried to be a Trojan horse for mental health, because the problem with being a psychiatrist is that most people don't see you. There's a shortage of professionals. There's a stigma. There's costs. So there's lots of barriers to entry. I wish the whole world could be in therapy. I think the world would be a better place, but unfortunately, that's not the case. And so, as a pediatrician and all primary care doctors, 30 to 40% of up to 30 to 40%, depending on location. What you talk about is mental health topics. And I always found that to be a really important hat in my closet that I could put on, and I could be the pediatrician for people who needed me to be the pediatrician, so they can tell me the things that they wanted to tell me. And especially for my community, my people, it was helpful to have that. Also, one of the topics that was near and dear to me was the new mother, actually, and postpartum period, postpartum depression, postpartum psychosis. And it turns out the best way to reach, that mother, or one of the best ways to reach that mother, is through the newborn exam. While you're checking the baby and you're just chatting with mom, you can get a lot of information. We can actually screen for postpartum depression, et cetera. So being a Trojan horse was always on my mind from day one, actually, even when I signed up to become a psychiatrist, because I just felt like, wow, this is an incredible, I still to this day have such an awe for mental health. I think it's like there's a certain magic of mental health that's so empowering. And the problem is that it doesn't reach the people who need it the most. And, being a pediatrician helped reach more people. And now, after my training and so forth, I've just constantly looked for ways to help the people who don't make it to my office.
Yeah. And that's great, because I can absolutely share that, because a lot of the people that I have my psychology degree myself, and I find it when I want to give them, whenever they hear the word psychology or counseling or therapy, they shy away from it. And so I've had to find another way, just like you using the pediatrician and kind of coupling that to get the mental health portion into it. For me, it's coupling it with morning routines and habits. Because habits are very dear to my heart, but it's essentially the habits change the mindset. They change your identity once you kind of eradicate the limiting beliefs that a lot of us carry around. So I find it that I had to couple morning routines and habits, and then to actually dive into the mental health portion of it. So what are some other ways are you getting creative to reach those people?
Yeah, I love the way you put that, because our actions matter. Our behavior matters, and all too often we are critical of each other and ourselves on our behavior, but we're just patterns. And if you were to really objectively just take a step back and look at yourself, and even when you're about to get into that, fight with your significant other, or when you're about to get into that argument with your, family member, or if you take a step back, it's just a pattern often that's repeating itself. And I love how you put that our routines matter, and our being conscious of those, and then, getting a little bit of control over it. Like we can control our health to some extent. We have some say in it. It's not just, sometimes it can feel like we're being controlled by these invisible forces, but I love the way you put that. But yeah, to answer your question about how I'm, finding ways to help with that, I think it's all about talking. Like when I was in residency, I remember I was walking down Madison Avenue and I was so depressed. I was just depressed. Tears are streaming down my cheek, I remember. And I was coming back from a happy hour actually with my co-residents. And I was thinking like, how the hell do I wasn't alone, unfortunately, in the statistic that 1 out of 5 medical professionals is depressed. And it's one of the highest professions of people who unfortunately take their own lives. So suicide rate is very high. And these are some of the brightest, highest functioning people on earth. So anyway, there I was, maybe a statistic, but walking down Madison Avenue, I'm just thinking to myself, how the hell do I get out of this? And it was like I was in this tunnel in the middle, and there was only one way out, which is to keep on going through. And I thought to myself, I was at the time learning how to provide therapy. So in my office, I was having these incredible conversations with the people that I was serving. And I thought, wow, these were really amazing. The only other place I could find like that type of real conversation, people just being really open, was the bar and happy hour. And I thought there had to be a way to get this like real conversation outside of the therapist's office or bar. A hangover doesn't have to be required to open up. And why is it for so many? And I thought to myself, the only way I'm going to get out of this tunnel is, it sounds cheesy, but I was like, through my patients. And what I did was I flipped everything in reverse. See, as a resident training to be a doctor and do all these things, you're overwhelmed. There's just so much work, and there's just not doing it is not an option. Not because like, oh, someone's forcing you to do it. It's because people's lives are at risk. I remember just like staying up all nights on call, just worried, is the kid going to be okay through the intensive care unit? And am I going to be able to do, just studying constantly and just, it's overwhelming. At the same time, success is the only option. So there I was, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, how am I going to get through this? There's so much work. There's so many things to do. And I just said, let me just flip the script. Let me just put this all upside down on its head. I could do everything for my patients when I just thought about them first. So what I decided to do was I during rounds, I would have conversations with all my patients. And I have conversations with everybody. And when I made that personal connection with people and I had conversations, I learned more about their lives. Then suddenly, like everything I needed to do for them and to care for them would automatically happen. I would know I had to get blood work for them. I would know I had to reorder their diet order. Like I wouldn't drop the ball anywhere when I started thinking about the person, as opposed to the way I think we all think about our lives so much, which is like a checklist. Like, oh my God, I have a checklist. I have to do this, and this today. And who the hell wants to wake up to that? I had to do this, and this today. It's like, and when there's no room for error, it becomes really challenging. But when you think about the people, so I thought to myself, these patients are going to get me through this incredibly overwhelming, obstacle, that of residency and these tests and all these things I had to do. And when I just focused on the people, suddenly it just all opened up, and slowly, just inch by inch, and suddenly I got out of that tunnel. And once you're on the other side, anyone who's danced with darkness knows what I'm talking about. When you get to that other side, one of the things that's so uplifting about humanity is that one of the things that I and what a lot of people want to do is help other people who've been in their predicament or their situation. And that's really kind of what I set off to do. I said, the problem with, the system right now, I wish everyone could be in therapy, but unfortunately, most people will not be in therapy. How can I help people who don't make it to my office? And so I decided to make a game, called Truth or Bear. And it's a classic game, but it has our twist in that the questions and the dares are written by therapists. And it's not therapy, but it's intended to be therapeutic. And so when you answer these questions or you do these dares, it's a conversation starter and I'm hoping people can have some of the best conversations of their life, without having with someone other than just their therapist and outside of that bar. You can have it with each other. And when we start having conversations, real conversations, open, vulnerable, real, not judgmental, all the things that are such hallmarks of therapy, real therapy, we can have those conversations with each other. You don't have to be a patient or a psychiatrist to have a great conversation. And so I think the morning routine is really just flipping your to-do list into a people list. And when I wake up, for me personally, like yesterday, I'll say so I was getting into to-do lists again. I have lots of to-dos as the head of my company, and I'm trying to help manage the team, et cetera. A lot of to-dos, and it can get overwhelming. And I'm a productivity person. I'm not going to lie. I find it, I am, challenging to do things like meditation and some of the hacks and the tricks out there, which I think work for so many. For me, I struggle with that. I'm all about productivity all the time. So what I have to do is, again, I had to flip it into people. So what I do in the morning is mentally, I say to myself, I always plan the day before or the week before people that I'm looking forward to interacting with. And I made sure I have really great conversations with them. So yesterday, for example, I had set up a basketball game for later that evening with someone that I had, a new friend that I just made who also liked basketball, something that I like. I don't get, a lot of time to do it, but it was the first time I played actually in a few years. And what it did for me when I woke up, and I had that in my mind that I was going to be playing with this person and some other people, and I was going to have that human connection. It just drove the rest of my day. It drove me through my tasks. And then when I think of my tasks, I don't think about the task, but I think about the person that I'm going to be doing it with. So when I say, oh, we got to get this, piece of content up on social media, I think about the person that I'm making that content with. I think about their characteristics. I think about what it is that I really admire about them, what it is I take from them and grow by working with them. I think about the person that we filmed and the story that we captured, and how, I think about my initial purpose for wanting to do what I do. And so by focusing on the people, suddenly my purpose becomes a lot more evident to myself rather than just thinking of it as a to-do list.
Yeah, you touch on something very important here. Putting the patient or the people first, and it reminded me as you were talking about Zig Ziglar, because Zig says, "Do you know Zig Ziglar?"
Yeah,
yeah. Zig Ziglar says, "If you help enough people get what they want, you will get what you want." And the way you use that to actually as therapy for yourself. Right? During that depression time, you realize, okay, I need to help people holistically. I need to help people all know them so very well that I don't drop the ball anywhere. So that was very powerful. I'm really glad you shared that because it rings true to we are meant to serve. We are meant to give back. It's in our nature to find our purpose and to actually add value to other people's lives. So you just reinforced that, and I'm really glad you did.
Yeah, and I would say just to add on to that it's, the helping others. Like a lot of times when people say like helping others, it feels like, oh, like very like kumbaya, like, oh, I'm like I'm Gandhi or something like that. And the reality is I'm not. I'm just like a regular dude like anybody else. And I have my flaws and all this and the other. And yet I want to help people. But the way it happened is almost like a self-serving nature. Like we help others just because we all crave the same thing, which is human connection. And so helping someone is just a really great form of human connection. It's very rewarding, and so then it keeps us coming back for more. But if I'm being honest, it's not like when I was in that moment that I sat there and I said, "Oh, I got to help others in order to help myself." Like that might have been the result, but really, what had happened was I was providing therapy, and I just stumbled into it by accident. That I'm providing therapy, and I'm the one supposed to be helping them. But people don't realize, and you can probably relate with this very much being, on the other side, like me as the doctor, that we benefit from this a lot. I benefit from the people that I'm providing the therapy to. It's therapeutic for me. So how does that work? Well, it works just because when you have very real moments with human beings, it does something to your soul. And that's when the aha moment went off for me. So it didn't happen though. I would love to take credit and say, oh, I'm such a great person that I realized that I had to help people to help myself. It didn't happen like that. It happened completely by accident.
Yeah. And it says a lot about who we are as human beings. We're social creatures by nature, and a lot of mental health comes up because of this disconnect.
Yeah,
a lot of mental health arises because of that. People isolate themselves. People, feel alone. Feel like they're not lovable. They're not worthy. They don't belong. They don't deserve certain things, or haven't been loved growing up, didn't get the type of affection. And so that we carry with us into adulthood, and that run havoc on our mental health.
Yeah. And I think that, what was really jarring for me personally was that, I had great people in my life. I had a great, relatively, great childhood and all this thing. And I think when I got into that state, I realized it was like I touched the third rail of the world, and I got this electric shock, and it scared the hell out of me. That I could be happy and good, but I could be worn to the ground so much by this world and by life and by people being mean or what have you. And New York City, which you live in New York City, you know what I'm talking about, the hustle, the rat race, and it can wear you down, that you can lose your happiness and you can become a cranky person, a crotchety person, a mean person. You can become a sad person, and you can start doling out the nastiness that hurt you so much, and it becomes this horrible cycle. And it was very profound to me to feel like, wow, I was like, I guess this is how it happened. I don't know. For me, that's how it happened. And I think it's, it's really like, just like, it's humbling is what it is when you realize that, like, I'm not all
an exception.
Like I'm just, my shit don't stink. Like I'm just, like I can go, any one of us. The reality is any one of us can like lose the material possessions that we have, and any one of us can, lose the happiness that you could be just married and on top of the world, and then several years later or whatever, what have you, your relationship could be falling apart, and you can be getting divorced, and you can be having a great relationship with your parents, and then they can be deteriorating, and someone can pass away unexpected. Like any number of things can happen. And sometimes it's not even like some big thing that happens, but it's just a series of lots of little things, which it was for me. It was and it was just so telling that like, well, any of us can really kind of struggle with our mental well-being and our wellness and our health. And when they say, when we talk about mental, I always think it's interesting when you talk about mental health, what's the first thing that comes to mind for most people? It's
depression, anxiety.
But it's like, it's depression, anxiety. It's when you talk about physical health, what's the first thing that comes to mind for people? It's like
ache, pain.
Yeah, but I think like for a lot of people, when you talk about physical health, like they think about like yoga and Pilates and kale smoothies. But when you talk about mental health, people think about like, depression and like crying on a bathroom floor. But they think of mental illness when they think of mental health. But mental health is really something for all of us. Mental health is everything. And so when we say like, oh, do you care about mental health? That's like saying, do you care about breathing? Like mental health is everything and everyone. So the statistics, when we talk about, we're talking about mental illness. It's a very, and mental health is a spectrum. So if you can, that saying of like, if you can walk, you can dance. If you can talk, you can sing. Well, if you can feel, then you can understand mental health, because it's all spectrum. You might not understand depression, frank major depressive disorder, or someone wanting to not live anymore, but you can understand feeling sad. And you might not understand paranoia or psychosis, but you can understand feeling like scrutinized and feeling like, things aren't working out your way. Like there's a spectrum to like all of it. And it's what's compelling about the mind. It's also why we can have so much humanity when it comes to mental health. Like people ask me like, for Truth or Bear, what is like the ethos? What is, what are you guys about? Like we're about humanity. I think we have so much more in common than we have different. We all have mothers, we all have fathers, we all have brothers, we all have sisters. We all have the same kind of problems. Actually, we all have the same emotions. We've all felt anger. We all felt happiness, jealousy, sadness, all the range of emotions. We have those things in common. And you can take any two people from any two walks of life. One of the things I found compelling about pediatrics, for example, is you can take a mother from East Africa, and you can take a mother from Puerto Rico, and take a mother from Oklahoma, and there's things that are so similar, and there's experiences that are so similar that it's really heartwarming, really. When you hear somebody else tell your story, suddenly you don't feel alone.
Right.
And how does that happen?
I love the distinction that you made between mental health and mental illness. And I agree with you. We overlook it. We automatically go to mental illness whenever we hear anything about mental health or psychology or counseling or therapy, where it's Viktor Frankl puts it best and says it's unavoidable suffering, right? This is the life we live in, where we are meant to be put through the fire so we can grow and become resilient. And so it sometimes it shows up in mental illness or depression or anxiety, but there are things we can put in place to actually combat that, right? There are habits that we can do. For some people, playing the game, your game, like it's essentially the truth of there, just being able to talk to family members on a Friday night, having game night. There's ways around that as long as we are finding ways to connect. And I want to talk about how do we heal around with mental health? What other ways?
Yeah. And like, to the morning routine, like I think every day, like the night before, at least I try to set up my day the next day. And these days, there's a time where it was hard for me to get out of bed. And now I like jump out of bed. And, a lot has changed obviously since then and now. And I think one of the big ones is like, well, when you feel like your life is in your control, suddenly that does something really important. And when your life is in your control, and the reality is our lives are in our control. Sometimes it's complicated, but we can get to a mental place where we say, hey, well, even in a circumstance where you feel like, you're somewhat entrapped, you can find those little beacons of light, which are people, other people, and you can place them in your path the next day. So I just think to myself, what are the tasks I need to do, but what are the people I get to work with, and who are the people I get to affect? And I just think people. My morning routine is about people. I saw this interesting, I've been battling with this thought about, someone said like, whatever you do, let's not get even started on social media, but like whatever you do, don't, one of the first things that a lot of people do is they scroll through their social media feeds, Instagram feeds. And someone said, whatever you do, don't do that. Or just stop doing that. Try to do that. And I think that comes from like a really good place. And I have lots of strong viewpoints on social media. I think it's, really powerful tool that went awry. The system is wrong. It's kind of taken over our brains and not in a good way, where we're just, it's addictive and it's just this distorted reality. And I've seen a generation really, like it started with, I'm a millennial psychiatrist, and millennials started the social media, and Gen Z now is inherited it. And I've seen the effects of everyone being affected, higher anxiety, depression, loneliness is through the roof. And I see amazing people who just lack one thing, which is self-esteem. And they don't feel good enough. Day after day after day after day, I see amazing people not feeling good enough. And it's so sad to see that. And it's like, we have to fix it. And so social media definitely is a problem, and I see where that advice comes from. But I've been trying to ask myself, why do people feel... See, when you think about problematic behaviors, you have to ask yourself, if you want to fix the behavior or stop the behavior, you have to start with a question. What purpose did that behavior serve? When you can understand that, then you might be able to dismantle it. So I've been asking myself, why do people want to scroll through their feed in the morning? Well, it's exactly what I'm saying, but like an easier way to think about people first. In a second, you can tap a button on your screen and you can see a bunch of people and seemingly feel like you're connected to them. Which in reality you're not. You're seeing a bunch of people's highlight reels or whatever they're trying to sell. And, then it has a reverse effect. And so that's probably why the person gave the advice that they gave, which is like, whatever you do, just cut the habit of looking at your Instagram feed in the morning. And, I think if you're going to break that pattern, you got to substitute. How to substitute? Got to find the substitute. Well, what's your substitute going to be if you are craving that humanity in the morning, seeing people doing things? You need that jolt. Well, how are you gonna get that? And that's a personal thing for everybody, And I think it starts off with really small things, just like, if you have kids, like wake up and like hug them.
Yeah. You have a dog, take them out for a walk, cuddle with them. I absolutely agree with you, Dr. Deepak, because habits are designed to solve our problems. There's an emotional state that we are craving. And so the habit is evolved to fulfill that, to satisfy that. And that's why we can never break a habit. We have to replace it with a more effective one. There are no bad habits either, right? Like we can go on about this, but there are ineffective habits. And so you got to replace them with effective habits. And for the social media, I totally agree with you that it's a need to connect. It's a need to see what's going on with everyone else, to connect in the world, especially during the pandemic. And the way to replace that is, with the kids, with your loved one, with your partner, and connecting, starting the day with that sense of connection. And sometimes with some time in solitude too. Right, to get grounded before you let the world in. I think a lot of that is misconstrued. People don't spend enough time inner perspective, gaining that inner perspective, because if you're not confident or not secure in yourself, you let the world tell you how to feel.
Oh my God, that Dr. Lanid, that I had goosebumps. That was, that's it. That's everything. That's it right there. Because we can, you just said so much brilliant stuff there, because I think we got to something really important. I always think a sign of a really great conversation is like when it was unexpected. You arrived somewhere that was greater than the sum of the conversation, and it was synergistic. And I think that's everything, actually. we can stop right there. No, but to your point, like also, in terms of like, I had, you mentioned like replacing the dopamine and replacing ineffective behaviors. There's effective and ineffective behaviors. And so when you look at it from that standpoint, which is such a kind way to look at yourself, so many people deal with shame, and the shame is just like a terrible feeling. We have little micro shame on ourselves. Like, oh my God, we're disappointed with ourselves, disappointed. And if you think about that, we're just constantly just cutting ourselves like over and over again, like a little tiny paper cuts, and they sting and they burn, and they're not additive. And sometimes when I work with like families and like little kids that have been acting out and are just, quote unquote problematic, and I say, well, we need to, and this is for little kids and this is for all of us, but we need to set ourselves up for success and for wins. So instead of like constantly giving ourselves attention or giving your child attention when they're doing something wrong or disappointing, we can do the exact opposite and constantly be giving attention when things are going right, or where, and they can be small things. So, getting the additive effect of like, we're winning, that ineffective behavior, as you put it, like it's getting some reaction from your body. Even though it's ineffective, it's getting something, and the body just wants to feel something. Hell, it wants to feel something, which is why a lot of times we do things that we're not happy about or proud of, but at least we felt something. You went on that bender last night, you felt something. So you feel shame the next day, but you know what? Let's try to understand what was at the root of that. You were trying to feel, and that's not a bad thing. How you did it, okay, maybe it wasn't the best way to do it, but like, what can we do moving forward? And I think when you set yourself up for wins and you're really proud of those little wins, and starting with that morning routine, and you cuddled with your dog and you took your dog for a walk and you cooked yourself an egg. Oh my God, you cooked yourself an egg. Like, holy cow, like celebrate that, like celebrate all those little things. And suddenly you have something that's replacing that ineffective behavior that's giving you some dopamine hit. It's giving you something, you're feeling something. So you're going to have to replace that. I think the AA and the 12-step community is something that I've studied for a number of years now. I think when we think about how we can help ourselves through the toughest stuff in the world, like addiction and substance, and it's at the root of it, what I see happening in that mechanistically. And I've had the good fortune of being able to not only have a dear friend who is part of that community and has been sober for a long time and has educated me about how they go about what they do, but I've actually been able to participate in the meetings. My friend has taken me there, and I've been invited to a lot of other ones. And I tell everybody I'm a psychiatrist, and I'm here as a friend of AA. I don't identify as an alcoholic, and they're very respectful. I go to open meetings. I recommend it for someone who's interested in kind of understanding how that works. But it was very eye-opening for me, because that's exactly what they do. Essentially, they replace an ineffective behavior, as you put it, with an effective one, which is just meeting up and talking. And I can't, it's hard to describe on a podcast, but I remember I was in a room with, it was like a men's group, and there was like 12 guys there, and I don't know how to explain it other than there was something really palpable in the middle of that room. I mean, I'm a man of science, but I guess I'm a little spiritual too. I don't know what it was, but there was something there. And these men were, and myself included, we were refueled. Our souls were refueled. And then we left that meeting, and then, this guy went to the law firm, and this guy went to the hospital, and this guy went to the contractor site, and this guy and it was like, it was refueling to the soul. And these are men who had been taken down by the bottle. Bottle would take them down. I mean, in such terrible ways. And they were able to overcome that. It was, to me, it was something, even though I'd been studying psychiatry and training for my entire adult life, and now 10 years of just constantly trying to see this, like, I learned so much in that moment. And these were quote unquote, non-professionals, right? A lot of them. And so the power that we have within us, people have a misconception of what therapy is. They think sometimes it's advice giving. And sometimes I think social media can be a little bit challenging, because people are looking for a quick, line to like fix their problems. And it's more complicated than that. But I'd say more accurately, therapy is not advice giving. It's partnering with someone and trying to like help find answers within themselves and through others. The benefit of talking to a therapist often is like, it's the power of 1,000 conversations. Like when you talk about some specific thing, the person you're talking to might have heard a number of other people talk about it. And we act as kind of almost this truth bank where people were able to share and open up with us, so we can then in turn help the next person who comes into the office. But if you think about that mechanistically, that also means that a lot of what we need is within ourselves and each other. So what's going to unlock that is really great conversation. And so thinking and just refocusing your life into thinking about the people in your life, as opposed to the tasks and the materials in your life, will get you all the tasks and materials that you'll ever want. Okay. I'm not Gandhi. Like I want a yacht just like anybody else. Like I want to go on vacations and I want to buy cool clothes and stuff but those things just get de-emphasized in a way that feels suddenly healthy again. And with Instagram and so forth, like things have become very unhealthy. And our brains have kind of taken over us and tricked us. And so we have to course correct. It's on us. We have to fix it.
We have to course correct. Absolutely. Just like this conversation is recharging and refueling to me, Ms. Dr. Deepak. I don't know how you feel, absolutely. But it really does feel like that. What we do, everything that we need is innate. It's internal. It's not new. There's this sense of finding your purpose, discovering your purpose. You're born with it. Mm-hmm. It's already in there. So why we're lost?
Absolutely. And when I look at I was just having a conversation with my dad, actually, over Memorial Day weekend. And I don't know, for a lot of people that might be able to relate when, I say like family is I love them. And at the same time, it's super challenging. You find yourself falling into your old self, your old patterns, and you can feel like you're regressing when you work so hard to progress. And it's the nature sometimes of being with family. But I remember just thinking about where some of my resentments lay with my family. And it's exactly what you just said, which is, I think like we have something in us, and a lot like what we're really trying to do in our early adulthood and which, it's interesting as an adolescent psychiatrist, people often think like adolescence is like 18, 20, but now like you can make a claim that adolescence goes into your 30s, because it's the period in your life where it's defined as the period in your life where you're trying to find your identity. And we have something that we're that's in us, and more accurately, we're trying to figure it out in that early period. And so a lot of times the resentments that I felt for, or still feel maybe for some family, is anyone who's like holding me back or putting me in a box or not helping me fulfill my greatest potential. I just want to live my best life. I want to be the best version of myself every day. I want to show up. And so I think that at the core of it, like you said, like we have something in us, we have to unlock it. And who can unlock it? Like we can unlock it if we just really reflect, and we can unlock it by having conversations like this. Like when Steve told me like, oh, do this podcast, and I really trust Steve's mind. He's a brilliant guy. And when he said, I knew exactly what he meant when he said, she's just so smart and she's so in touch and she's so, and I thought to myself, oh, I don't have to do a podcast this morning. I get to have this conversation with this incredible person that I need to meet. And lo and behold, an hour later, like this conversation's changed my week, my month, maybe, and I'm so fortunate to have had it with you. So thank you.
It is my pleasure. And I think it's going to change the course of my business, Dr. Deepak. So honestly, to be frank with you, I've just been trying to find a way around mental health and therapy and the psychology. And it was like the people who need it the most don't see the need, don't reach out. And it breaks your heart, as this is what you do. That's your purpose. And you want to see the world be better through mental health, to people not accepting the hand you're giving them.
Yeah.
And so this conversation just reaffirms like, this is what I am doing and I will not stop until it is done.
Oh my God. Amazing. And like, I think we both can relate with like being people of color in this space. Like, obviously we're after something that needs to happen, because you and I both have seen way too many people who've, the people who need it the most, like you said, don't get the help. And so my whole mission, and it sounds like yours as well, is like, we have to meet people where they are. We can't just demand that they do this. It doesn't work for my people, and we need to. And if that means, like right now, I'm making a game, I'm making an app, I'm making a podcast, I'm making, like I want to meet people. I'm using Instagram. We're on Instagram. Follow us, everyone. Play Truth or Bear.
Yep.
Watch, you can play, but you'll grow, and you'll see people answering questions openly, like these truths, doing the bears. And when you do that, it's just something really nurturing about that and healing about that. And so here I am using Instagram, Lunid. I'm using Instagram. Like I've been the person, I've never had Instagram. I've always said Instagram is terrible. Like I've seen it in the clinic. I've just seen all my patients getting all and here I am, I'm using it, but I hope at the end of the day, we're using it because I have to fight fire with fire. We have to meet people where they are.
You are. Yeah, it's same here. I'm in the West Coast and I'm waking up at 3 a.m. because I want to do a morning routine with people in the East Coast at 6 a.m. I'm up at 3 a.m. Okay. Because I'm meeting them where they're at, literally at their time zone. 3 a.m. for me, I'm getting up at 2 o'clock to be available at 3 and it's free. I'm doing free morning routine with them for 3 days straight so they can get in the groove and the momentum of it, because I strongly believe in the morning routine and how we start this mental health to secure that confidence you were talking about, self-confidence, self-worthiness, that you belong, that you're capable. And it starts with your morning routine. It starts with actually priming yourself. What you do in the first 10 minutes set the tone for the rest of the day. And if we can win the day, we can win the week, we can win the month, and it goes on. So tell me a little bit about your morning routine, because our missions, our value is very similar. We do it for the greater good, but how do you get up, dress up, and show up so you can do that?
So for me, I think about like what gives me the high, and my high comes in like creating things and productivity. So like right now, I think about like what, like I said, who am I going to get to work with to create something that hasn't been there out in the world ever before? And then who's that going to affect? So I just think about all the people in that supply chain of that product, and it just gets me going. So like right now, I spring out of bed, and I sometimes have to force myself to like go back to sleep for a little bit longer, it's the exact opposite problem that I had, a number of years ago. But like, I think, for me, it's just about thinking about like, wow, this experience or this thing, this product that wasn't there is going to be there tomorrow. And like how, and just really from the evening before, when I'm winding down, just trying to think to myself, like, what do I have to look forward to tomorrow? I think that's really the key. Like, like when we, work with patients and stuff and clients, and we say, we're talking about their depression, and we're talking about like a key question in the psychiatric interview. Probably the biggest one for me in my interviews is, what do you look forward to doing? And a lot of times people tell me, well, they don't look forward to doing anything, or they do look forward to doing something. And like, that's a really big distinction. If you find yourself, you ask yourself that question right now, everyone can ask themselves that question. It'll give you a little bit of a litmus test for like how your feeling is. And if the answer is you don't look forward to something, then something's wrong, and you got to like stop right there, and you got to like fix that. Because at the core of my morning routine is like waking up and looking forward to something genuinely, not setting up my day for a bunch of tasks and stuff, but really looking forward. And I visualize those things that I'm going to look forward to. Losing pleasure in things, it's called anhedonia. It's one of the core symptomatology to depression. And so that for my, my clinical interviews is a huge component, something I factor in very heavily. But even us just living day-to-day life, if you're, maybe it's not anhedonia, like frank anhedonia, where you don't have pleasure in anything anymore, that's troubling. That's like, it can be like quicksand where you can't get out of that cycle. And so getting out of that is more challenging. You don't want to get to that. So when you have the control of being able to set yourself up to look forward to things, you should do that. And it shouldn't just be like, a lot of times people are like, oh, get a hobby. Like when I say basketball, like I don't consider that a hobby. I consider it a part of my life. And when I can think about my work, I don't want to think about it as work. I know a lot of us don't have the privilege to be like, oh yeah, what I do is what I love, exactly what I love. There was many years where I had to do something that I didn't love, like study biochemistry or this, that, but the long-term reward of it is what kept me going through. So reframing my mind into thinking, well, even something that I don't quote unquote like doing, I like doing because it's going to get me the thing that I'm looking forward to. So that's the key. So tomorrow I might for example, tomorrow I have a pretty intense day. It's going to be back to back. We're actually filming. We're on set. We're going to be filming a bear, someone doing a bear, and it's a lot of work, but I'm looking forward to the end result of it. So it keeps me through it. Had it been 2 hours more of a set and twice as expensive and twice as hard to more equipment or whatever it is that stresses me out about that, then I might what it is might outweigh the benefit of what I get. And so we never want to be on that. We always want to formulate our day. I want to formulate my day so that I'm looking forward to something.
Right.
I do that for my day and I do that for my week.
And that's great. So how can we find the game? Where can we connect with you?
Just follow us at Play Truth or Bear. That's TRUTHORB as in boy, ARE. So Truth or Bear. So Play Truth or Bear. Follow us on Instagram, and the rest will happen. You'll check us out on Instagram, and you'll see people answering truths and bears using. Ultimately, we're just questions and dares from therapists, and I hope it helps people have some of the best conversations of their lives, feel as close as they can with people, not need an excuse to open up. And it's really cool. And we have an app in the App Store called Truth or Bear, but the link's in the bio. Just go to Instagram, check it out.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you for sharing. I will put that, I will share all that. I'm really, really excited and thrilled that we had this conversation today, Dr. Deepak.
One more little thing to add on to that is I just thought of if we're thinking about morning routines, I think it would be a really great morning routine to, maybe instead of turning on tap Instagram, you're going to do it. Everyone's doing it. They say they don't, but they do. And instead of going to the thing that makes you feel lesser than, not good enough, instead of going to the channel that is just eye candy and, doesn't really make you feel something, go to Truth or Bear and see somebody answer something for real. And they just might say something. They might tell your story, and it might make all the difference to just know you're not alone and that people actually are real. Please, this was fantastic. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, morning enthusiasts, that's it for today's show. Thank you for tuning in. If you love the Best Morning Routine Ever podcast, we'd love to hear from you. So go ahead and subscribe, rate, and give a review on iTunes or Google Play. While you're at it, tell a friend about the show. Be sure to visit bestmorningroutineever.com and our Facebook group to join the conversation, access the show notes, and discover our fantastic free bonus content. Until next time,